Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Widgets and Wonders. This is my weekly show about great products from small companies. Now, if you haven't seen this show before, this is a show pretty much devoted to cottage industry companies in the market of wargaming. So people who make things like terrain, token sets, measuring devices, literally any kind of widget and wonder that someone's gone out and made themselves. Now, I happen to think that making something and put it into the world is a really brave act, and it deserves as much exposure as humanly possible. So today, we're gonna look at Neoprene gaming mats from GameMat. It's in the title. It all does what it says in the tin. Now, GameMat, or the website, I think GameMat.eu actually might be what they go by. They produce neoprene gaming mats in all kinds of different sizes for tabletop wargaming. And caveat emptor, they decided to send me some mats. I actually previously had purchased a mat from them. It was the Fallout Zone mat that you've seen in the This Is Not a Test videos, and in lots of 40K videos and other sort of like videos that require a post-apocalyptic setting. But they decided that they liked my videos. They'd actually used pictures from those games on their website, and they sent along some mats for me to check out. So if you watched last week's Widgets and Wonders on Greenleaf Terrain, you got to see one of the mats already with some terrain set up on it, and that's the first mat I'll show you. But let's go through all four mats that they showed me. I'll talk about some of the games will be played on, and you can take a look and see for yourselves. So this first mat is called the Sands of Time. It's basically a dried riverbed with some crossings and then kind of bits and pieces of exposed ruiny stuff. It kind of has a Khemri-esque feel and fantasy to it, but these bits could just as easily be modern bits of civilization that just fallen in disrepair. If you want to take a closer look, I'm going to zoom in for you, and you can see the fineness of the detail. I will say it's printed very cleanly. There isn't a lot of color bleeding together, and you can certainly see lots of detail in sort of a fine way. It's not too busy, and there isn't stuff that's too distracting either. And the bits of sort of like detail that are on it wouldn't detract from different scales of miniatures. So for instance, the bits and pieces of like archway and pillar and stuff, they could be all kinds of sizes. So they could be really big and I could play like a 15 mil or a 10 mil game on here, or they could be really, really tiny, and it wouldn't distract too much overall from the scale of the game. I like that the palette's fairly muted, all kinds of blends together. And if you go and see last week's video, you can see with some of our new terrain on it as well. But yeah, there it is, a 6x4 Sands of Time mat. Let's take a look at the next one. Here's our second mat called Quarantine Zone. Now this one's gridded out with some 6-foot roads, and I will say that all the roads are the same width. So if that is something that bothers you, if you like, eyeballing distances and stuff like that, everything is kind of in a 6-inch grid here. Now in games with pre-measuring, that's not really a problem at all, but they're caveat emptor, it is what it is. It's also got sort of the footprints of buildings built into it. So what's really cool is if you have some terrain that's just kind of building walls and corners, for instance, the GW ruins, you could put them on this mat and you'd look like you had the building interior finished, and then the sort of like walls just sitting around it. So I think that's pretty cool. It's kind of been designed with that stuff in mind. And I do love how sort of techy and destroyed it is. I think this mat will probably see some heavy rotation in Necromunda games going forward. And even in This Is Not a Test, because I think it's probably just about the right size for that as well. There are some sort of like specific details. You can see some manhole covers right here. They're about 1.5 inches, 2 inches across. But you could scale up and scale down this. It would be a very big manhole cover if you're going to try and play Epic or some type of smaller scale game on it. But they're kind of few and far between. I think there's 2 of them on the whole mat. The cabling could just be huge. There's not a whole lot here that sort of like sizes and says exactly what size this stuff is. Again, I really like the cool palette with all the warm splashes. So it's got kind of a cool blue-gray thing, but then it has these warm splashes of yellow and red and sort of purples and stuff built into it too. There are lots of city mats on the market, especially for 40K, but I think this one's probably one of the sharpest. Again, I'll zoom in just so you can see even just like the paint chipping on the floor. I think that's kind of cool, is if you get up real close, you can see just like old concrete where the paint has started to like peel up and peel back and stuff. So they did a really good job, I think, of keeping the details nice and crisp. Once again, the printing is sort of immaculate. You don't have any kind of bleeding or colors going together. It's really, really nicely printed. It's on 2mm neoprene or 3mm neoprene. Looks like 2mm neoprene. So it is relatively light. It's just as robust as any other neoprene mat. It does have beveled corners, so no hard corners on it. And other than that, it's your standard neoprene gaming mat. So super nice finish. This will probably see a lot of rotation for both 40K, possibly even Infinity, and then like my near future sci-fi horror game stuff too. So let's check out what's next. Our third 6x4 mat is called Battleground, and it is sort of a, I would almost say like a highlands mountainside kind of terrain. There's rocky outcroppings, there's some large plants, but there isn't a lot of grass. What it looks like is more peat moss and scrub, and big scrub. So for instance, if I zoom in here for you, you can see how big the rocks are, but you can also see how big the regular plants are too. I'm gonna give you a miniature for scale. So appropriately, I'll throw down a Ariadne miniature. This is about the right size. You can see the size of the plants. They're not too big, but at the same time, they're not just like sheafs of grass. Like they're like full-on plants, ferns, some type of like I don't know, large leafed outdoor plant, almost like cactusy. But it's a very neat sort of feel to the terrain because it is very scrubby. It's different from a lot of grass mats out there. I have two favorite sort of grass mats. There's one from, actually it isn't even grass mat. It's called Swampland. It's the swamp mat from Frontline Gaming. And it's kind of my ubiquitous green mat. It gets used for a lot of things and I like it because it's so muted. This one's got two kind of palettes, warm and cold. And it reminds me actually of when I used to work in the Northwest Territories, that kind of terrain. It looks like tundra, and I kind of really like that. My other favorite green mat is actually a very vibrant, tall, long grass green mat from Urban Mats. And they're all three of them are very, very different. But that's why I'm kind of excited about this one, is it's again, another type of green sort of like outdoor terrain, but it's not the same as the other, like all of them are different. The swamp one's different from the grass mat from Urban Mats is different from this like sort of scrubland, badlands looking kind of like battle mat. So I'm pretty excited about it. Once again, I'll zoom back in on that grunt so you guys can see the details, the printing, once again, nice and clear. And when you see the details, they're not too big or too small. You could probably put some different scale miniatures on this. The plants would look a little bit big at some point. And I think that this mat would probably, you'd want to keep it 28 mil or bigger. You get away with actually bigger than 28 mil, I'd say, because those plants are such a good size. You could probably go up to 54 mil and it would look just fine. So if anyone wants to play Inquisitor, this mat's probably perfect because the details are big enough that they actually wouldn't look off scale with the miniatures themselves. So there it is, Battlegrounds. Let's take a look at the next one. So this last mat is called Wasteland, and it's actually a 3x3. And my intent with this one was, it was a new mat for Malifaux, and actually for Frostgrave too. It has kind of a pebble destroyed, just what I imagine Mordor looks like, kind of look to it. So you could almost see like Frodo and Sam walking along here to go destroy the ring in Mount Doom. But it's gonna work just as well with my frozen scenery, I think, because of the lightness, as it will with like my quarantine zone ruins and stuff for Malifaux. So it's a nice ubiquitous 3x3 mat. I think it's good for any game that you play on 3x3. Of course, Malifaux and Frostgrave both pop to mind as big ones we are currently playing, but I've got some games I'll be playing in the near future that will also work on this size of a table and with that same terrain. So I'm pretty excited about it. Now I'll zoom in again, just like the other three previous mats. Printing's nice and high quality, details are nice and crisp. There's not a lot of bleeding together. The stones are relatively large, but once again, I mean, it looks like Dark Souls, right? Like those stones could be huge, they could be small. There is no detail here that would scale your miniatures for you. So you could actually probably play some smaller scale games as well. If heavy gear was still played on a 3x3, actually this would be a good mat for it. And it would look just fine. There's nothing identifiable that would actually scale your models against. So I think that's a great thing in a gaming mat. That is one thing that, and it probably only would bother me because I have so many gaming mats and I play on them all the time. But when you have details that specifically scale the mat, you can use the mat for less things. And I don't think it's wrong. There's nothing wrong with doing it. But just be careful about having details that then sort of like set the scale for what you've got on the table. And that's completely fine if you're designing your mat for just one thing. But for generic mats like this one, I think it's a fantastic idea just to keep it sort of free of specific details that you can use them for whatever you want. So it is a 3x3 Wasteland mat from GameMat.eu. So there's our look at 4 new neoprene gaming mats from GameMat.eu. We had Wasteland, we had Battlegrounds, was it Quarantine Zone? Not Fallout Zone. Fallout Zone's the other one that I have. And then Fallout Zone, Wasteland, Quarantine Zone, and the Sands of Time were the 4 that we took a look at. So we had 3 6-footers and a 3x3. I'm excited to use them in all kinds of games, and you guys will see lots of them coming up real soon. So now if you guys know of a company with a great product that you think is getting overlooked or isn't getting enough attention, feel free to have them email me at guerrillaminiaturegames@gmail.com, or they can message me through my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/out-of-the-basement into the streets. It's a really cool and brave thing to go out and make something, put it in the world, and show it off to people, and I think it deserves all the recognition and attention it can get. So we'll see you for more widgets and wonders in the future. Until then, I'm Ash. Have a great day.